In this video, we begin our discussion on Chapter 1, where our topic today will be the circular flow. In today's video, make note of the two concepts of what an economy is, as well as what the circular flow model is as well. Where to begin? Economics is the study of choice. It seeks to address how decisions are made with finite resources. This can be at the individual level, which is what microeconomics is concerned with, or this can be at the aggregate level, which is what macroeconomics is concerned with. Our course is macroeconomics, so this is the route that we will go, where we will use economics to tell stories about an entire economy, where more precisely, we will want to tell stories about the United States. Not only this is we will also be able to look at data and see if there's any support for our stories of the United States. All right, so with some sense of where to go and what we will be doing, a starting place for us will be, if we want to tell stories about an economy, we should have some idea of what one is. So an economy is the sum of production and exchange in an area. By production, I mean the making of goods and services. By exchange, I mean the trading of those very same goods and services, as well as the resources used to make or produce those goods and services. These resources are referred to as factors of production. And lastly, in terms of area, this is just going to be location, where this is also vague like area, but that is for us to fill in, where location for us will typically mean country, and the country we will typically be talking about also will be the United States. Okay, so with this definition in place and a little bit more in mind what's going on in an economy, let's look a bit further at this. Okay, so what's being exchanged? I mentioned it was goods and services and factors of production. Well, in terms of these goods, these are going to be tangible or physical wants that can be traded. So I'll write down tangible here in red. This is going to be different than a service, which are going to be intangible wants, or things that we want where we may not get something physical back. Intangible wants. And in terms of factors of production, I mentioned that these are the resources used to produce or make goods or services. This is going to be a topic for another video, and there's going to be 4 of them: entrepreneurship, capital, land, and labor. Where for right now, labor is going to be the one that I will use as example in our circular flow model. And in terms of factors of production, I'll put resources to make goods and services. All right. Well, in terms of these goods and services and factors of production, who's exchanging them? This is going to be between different agents or decision makers in the economy, in which we'll have 4 that we consider. The first one that we have here are consumers. They're going to be you and I, who buy goods and sell our time, and I will also refer to consumers from time to time as households. Our second type of agent is going to be the firm, which are going to be also known as businesses. Our third agent is going to be the government, which we can think of as the manager of an economy. And then lastly, we have the rest of the world. This agent type is a catch-all. This is going to be the consumers, firms, and governments of other countries. So 1 through 3 of other countries. All right, so we have a better idea of what's being exchanged, as well as who's doing the exchanging, the last thing that we may want to ask then is, well, where are these exchanges occurring? They're going to be occurring in markets. Markets are institutions that bring buyers and sellers together. They can be in person or they can be online. Not only that, these institutions can be further broken up into different types of markets. When we talked about what's being exchanged, I said goods and services as well as factors of production. There can be a market for goods and services, which I will often refer to as product markets, and there can also be a market specifically for factors of production called a factor market. So then here for markets, I'm just going to put institutions. Okay, so things are coming along. We may now have everything that we need in order to start getting an idea of what goes on in an economy. Okay, so let's put this information together. So here I have a base circular flow model. On the right, I have two different types of agents. I have the consumer on the left, and I have the firm on the right. I have two different locations that they can go to. They can go to the product market at the top, which is where goods and services will be traded. They can also go to factor markets at the bottom, where factors of production such as land, labor, capital, and entrepreneurship can be exchanged. Where for right now, let's just think about this as where labor can be traded. Okay, so what can these agents do in these different locations? Well, let's kind of start with the consumer, because I mentioned that households or consumers are you and I. And I'll draw this in blue is going to be a good color. All right, so let's start in our factor markets. Well, we go to work, and when we go to work, in exchange for that, we earn an income. So I am drawing an arrow from factor markets to consumers, and with that income, we go to our favorite stores and we purchase goods and services. That money is then used, or excuse me, is transferred to firms in the form of revenue, where then now that money is then used by firms or businesses to continue paying for our labor. What I've drawn is an inner set of arrows where from factor markets to consumers, we have that consumers are earning an income. With that income, they can buy their favorite goods and services, where that money then hits the cash registers of those businesses and becomes their revenue. And that revenue is then used to pay for our labor, which will be costs or money flowing out for a business. Okay, well, this is only part of the interaction, but it's a pretty good start. Let's capture an outer ring, or what's being exchanged with the money that's being traded. So I'll use red, and let's draw an outward set of arrows. All right, okay, well, we started from factor markets, and it was mentioned that we were earning an income for selling our time. So from consumers, I'm now going to draw an arrow from consumer to factor market. So in order to earn that income, we sell a portion of our day in the form of labor. That labor is then used by businesses to produce the very same goods and services that we see at our favorite stores, where those very same goods and services are then purchased by us, the consumer. Now, adding in our details that we mentioned, I'm going to use FOP for short for factors of production. We are selling our factors of production, such as labor. Businesses use those factors of production in order to produce goods and services. And those goods and services are purchased by us and make their way to our household. Okay, so we have an inner set of arrows that shows how money is being traded, and we have an outward set of arrows showing how factors of production and goods are being traded. Okay, so then in terms of our consumers, what actions are available? We saw that we buy goods and services, and we saw that we sell factors of production such as labor. On the firm side of things, we saw that firms, on the other hand, they are a buyer. However, they are a buyer of factors of production such as labor so that they can make goods and services, where they sell those very same goods and services. This is a pretty good depiction of an economy. However, this may not capture everything. First off, we mentioned that there was a government and there's also the rest of the world. However, furthermore, yes, it's true that we earn an income and that we can spend that income on our favorite goods and services. However, that's not the only option available to us. We may have the option of savings, so we should be able to account for that. So let's introduce a new market where I have introduced a financial market below the factor market, where for right now we can think of this as a bank, where in terms of this, we as consumers, we can park our money at a bank and banks can issue out loans. All right, so in terms of this, I'll draw this in purple. Well, when a consumer earns their income, they can spend on their favorite goods. However, they also have the ability to save a portion of that income. That's money that is sitting at the bank, which then gives them the ability to loan out some of the funds that they have, where those funds are loaned out to businesses in the hope of expanding how many goods and services they can make. So our story is that with the income that a consumer earns, they can now spend and save, and that businesses can now take out loans so that they can spend as well. So now we can add an additional action to our consumers in that they save. All right, so that feature is a bit more realistic with the real world. However, we still are missing a little bit. Well, let's add a new agent. One of the agents that we talked about was a government, the manager of the economy. So let's add them next. I'm going to put them in the center of this circular flow model, where in terms of the government, they have a couple of options available to them. I'm going to use green for them. Well, the first thing is, you may have noticed if you, as we go to work, we may get some of our paycheck taken out from time to time, and this is going to be an arrow going from consumers to the government, and this is going to be a tax. Businesses also face this same thing in terms of their revenue, where a portion of their revenue goes to the government in the form of taxes, and they can choose to help us out from time to time. This is going to be referred to as a transfer payment. So those taxes can be collected. A portion of those taxes can be sent back to us in the form of a transfer payment or back to firms. However, that's not the only option that's available. A government may choose to also spend on goods and services in product markets. So we'll have one arrow going up and we'll have one arrow going down. So what we said is that governments collect taxes from consumers. They can help us out from time to time in the form of transfer payments, or with the taxes that they have collected, they can also choose to spend on goods and services where they will receive those very same goods and services. So in terms of actions available to a government, for right now, what we have is that they can tax or they can spend on goods and services and transfer payments as well. Okay, so this is pretty good. What we have here is a closed economy in that we have consumers and firms within a country's border. We also have their manager in the form of a government, and we have the major markets covered. A goods market, a market for factors of production, as well as a market for money. However, at this point, many countries trade with one another. So it may be useful to include that. That's where that agent or that catch-all agent of the rest of the world was useful. So let's introduce them. Okay, so I've introduced the rest of the world at the top of the circular flow graph, and for right now, we're just going to have them interacting in product markets. Okay, for the rest of the world, what's a good color that I haven't used? Let's use orange. Okay, so in our product markets, our decision makers have a couple options available. We can have an arrow going up to the rest of the world and an arrow going down from the rest of the world to our product markets. This is saying that something's going to other countries and something is coming from other countries to us. Where the options available are decision makers in our economy can choose to spend, which I'm going to put as domestic spending, and I'm going to abbreviate with D for domestic. And in exchange, we get foreign goods and services coming into our country. However, other countries also have this option available in that they can choose to buy our goods and services, so we can have domestic goods going to the rest of the world, and in exchange for that, we can have foreign spending coming into our country. So I'm going to put F, spend right there. And I don't like how that looks, so let me erase that real quick. Okay, so for the rest of the world, the actions that we had available was that they could buy goods and services. Whoops, and I misspelled that. And they could also sell goods and services. A concept referred to as exports and imports, which may be something that we want to develop in the following lecture. Okay, so this is good for us for right now. Here, this is our circular flow model of the economy. It represents a set of agents in an area, the actions that they can perform, as well as where they can perform those actions at. To summarize that, the circular flow model is a graphical model of an economy. It shows what agents are in an economy, where for us, that's going to be the rest of the world, consumers, firms, and a government, where those agents are interacting, which are going to be markets, institutions that bring buyers and sellers together. And for right now, a product market, a factor market, and a financial market is what we need, and how those agents are interacting. Are they a buyer or a seller in that market? With all this in mind, we'll pick up looking at the circular flow a bit more next time.